The text came through during my morning meeting with the executive board. Alex, I'm house shopping in Greenwich. 2.4 million waterfront property. Jealous much? Face with tears of joy, stick to your basic banking job while I live the dream. My sister Victoria had always been like this. Every achievement was a weapon. Every success was ammunition to mock my ordinary life. I was 32 years old and sitting in the boardroom of one of the largest private banks in Connecticut. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Hartford's skyline stretched toward a perfect autumn morning. Around the table sat the senior leadership team of Hartford Private Banking and Trust. And at the head of that table sat me, Alexandra Morrison, Chief Lending Officer and Vice President of Risk Management. But Victoria didn't know that. To her, I was just Alex, the bank teller. She'd decided that's what I was 7 years ago when I'd first started at HPB as an entry-level loan processor, and she'd never bothered to update her assumptions. Why would she? In her world, she was the successful one. Investment banking at Goldman Sachs. Designer wardrobe. Penthouse in Manhattan. Engagement to Preston Caldwell III, heir to a pharmaceutical fortune. I drove a Subaru and lived in a modest townhouse in West Hartford. I shopped at Target. I didn't post my life on Instagram. So obviously I was the failure. Everything all right? Asked James Chin, our CEO. He'd noticed me checking my phone. Fine, I said, putting it away. Just my sister reminding me how much more successful she is. A few people around the table chuckled. They knew the dynamic. Victoria had called the bank 6 months ago trying to reach me, and when my assistant had said, Ms. Morrison is in a board meeting, Victoria had laughed and said, board meeting? Alex, she's probably organizing someone's filing cabinet. My assistant had told everyone. It had become an office joke. All right, James said, bringing us back to focus. Let's review this week's high-value loan applications. Alex, you're up. I opened my laptop and pulled up the pending applications. My team processed every loan request over $1 million. As Chief Lending Officer, I had final approval authority on all of them. I scrolled through the list. $3.2 million commercial property loan, $1.8 million construction loan, $4.5 million business acquisition loan. Then I saw it. Application hashtag HPB47829. Applicant, Victoria Morrison Caldwell. Property address, 47 Waterside Lane, Greenwich, Connecticut. Loan amount, $2,400,000. Status, pending review. My sister's mortgage application. For her dream house. On my desk. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Alex. James prompted. You stopped scrolling. Sorry, I said. Just saw an interesting one. I'll review it this afternoon. But I already knew what I'd find. Because I knew Victoria. And I knew her fiancé Preston. And I knew exactly how they lived. After the meeting, I returned to my office and closed the door. My assistant Sarah brought me coffee without being asked. She'd worked with me for 4 years and could read my moods perfectly. Bad news, she asked. Potentially. Hold my calls for an hour. I opened Victoria's loan application and started reading. Hold up. Victoria and I had grown up in the same house, but we'd lived different lives. She was 3 years older, effortlessly beautiful, socially brilliant. Our parents had adored her. Every report card was celebrated. Every achievement was proof of their superior parenting. I was the quiet one. The bookish one. The one who preferred studying to parties. When Victoria got into Yale, there was a celebration dinner for 50 people. When I got into Boston College with a full academic scholarship, Mom said, "That's nice, dear," and went back to planning Victoria's graduation party. Victoria had gone into investment banking straight out of college. She'd made good money, $180,000 starting salary, bonuses that sometimes doubled that. She'd dated men from wealthy families, joined the right clubs, lived in the right neighborhoods. I'd gone into banking too, but the boring kind. Loan processing, credit analysis, risk assessment. I'd started at Hartford Private Banking and Trust at 25, making $48,000 a year processing mortgage applications. Victoria had called it adorable that I was playing banker. But I wasn't playing. I was learning. I'd spent 2 years as a loan processor, analyzing every application that crossed my desk. I'd learned to spot red flags, identify risk patterns, understand the mathematics of creditworthiness. I'd taken night classes in finance and risk management. I'd earned my CFA charter. At 27, I'd been promoted to senior credit analyst. At 29, risk management director. At 31, chief lending officer. My salary was now $380,000 plus bonuses. I managed a team of 47 people. I had approval authority over loans worth billions of dollars annually. Victoria thought I was still processing mortgage paperwork in a cubicle. I'd never corrected her. What was the point? She'd never asked about my job. Never showed interest in my career. She just assumed I was exactly where she'd left me 7 years ago. Now her mortgage application sat on my desk and I was going to read every single line. The application was impressive at first glance. Combined income of $780,000. Victoria's $280,000 salary plus Preston's $500,000 trust fund distribution. Substantial down payment of $600,000. Excellent credit scores in the 780s. But I didn't stop at first glance. I never did. I pulled their complete financial history. Bank statements, credit reports, investment accounts, debt obligations. As chief lending officer, I had access to everything. What I found made my stomach turn. Victoria and Preston's bank statements showed a spending pattern that was completely unsustainable. Monthly expenses averaging $45,000. Credit card balances totaling $340,000 across 11 cards. Car loans for 2 vehicles worth $200,000 combined. A personal loan of $150,000 taken out 8 months ago. They were drowning in debt while maintaining the appearance of wealth. The $600,000 down payment? Not from savings. It was a loan from Preston's father, structured to look like a gift but with documentation showing it had to be repaid within 5 years at 8% interest. That made it debt, not equity. And they hadn't disclosed it on the application. I pulled up their income verification. Victoria's $280,000 salary was real, but she'd been at Goldman Sachs for only 8 months after being fired from her previous firm. Her income history showed instability, 5 jobs in 7 years. Preston's $500,000 trust distribution? I called our wealth management division and confirmed it with his family's financial advisor. The trust was being restructured due to family concerns about Preston's spending habits. His distribution was being reduced to $200,000 next year. They'd applied for the loan based on income they wouldn't have in 12 months. I reviewed the property appraisal. The house was worth $2.4 million, but it needed significant work. The inspection report showed foundation issues, an outdated electrical system and potential water damage. Repairs would cost at least $300,000. They couldn't afford the house, couldn't afford the repairs, and had lied on the application. Any competent loan officer would reject this. But I wasn't just any loan officer. I was the chief lending officer. And I was Victoria's sister. I had a choice to make. My phone buzzed. Another text from Victoria. Preston and I are celebrating at Le Bernardin tonight. $500 per person tasting menu. You probably can't afford it on your salary, but maybe someday. Face blowing a kiss. I looked at her debt summary. She had $89,000 in credit card debt. Preston had $251,000. They were celebrating a house they couldn't afford with money they didn't have. I opened a new document and began typing the loan rejection notice. Revelation. I spent 3 hours documenting everything. Every red flag, every inconsistency, every undisclosed debt. The rejection notice was 12 pages long. Thorough, professional, and absolutely damning. Then I scheduled a mandatory loan review meeting for Friday at 2 p.m. All high-value loan rejections required a face-to-face meeting with applicants. Bank policy. Victoria and Preston would have to come to the bank. To my office. Where they'd learn exactly who I was. Friday morning, Sarah confirmed they'd arrived. Ms. Morrison Caldwell and Mr. Caldwell are here for their 2 p.m. meeting. Should I show them to conference room B? No, I said. Bring them to my office. Your office? Yes. I want them to see exactly where they are. At 2 p.m. Sarah opened my door. Victoria walked in first, dressed in a Chanel suit, carrying a Birkin bag radiating confidence. Preston followed, looking bored and entitled in his custom suit. They both stopped dead when they saw me sitting behind the massive mahogany desk with Alexandra Morrison, Chief Lending Officer on the nameplate. Alex. Victoria's voice was confused. What are you doing in here? I work here, I said calmly. Please sit down. No, I mean, what are you doing in this office? We're supposed to meet with the Chief Lending Officer about our mortgage. You are. I'm the Chief Lending Officer. Victoria laughed. That's not funny, Alex. We have an important meeting. Where's the actual loan officer? I gestured to the nameplate. Then to my Cornell MBA diploma on the wall. Then to the plaque from the American Bankers Association naming me Young Banking Professional of the Year. I am the Chief Lending Officer, Victoria. I've held this position for 14 months. Before that, I was Director of Risk Management. I have approval authority over all loans exceeding $1 million. Including yours. Preston spoke up. This is ridiculous. We'll speak to your supervisor. My supervisor is James Chin, the CEO. Would you like me to call him? He's in the building. Victoria's face had gone pale. You're serious? Completely. Now sit down. We need to discuss your mortgage application. They sat. Victoria's confidence had cracked. Preston looked furious. I opened their file. Your application for a $2.4 million mortgage has been rejected. What? Victoria stood up. That's impossible. We qualify. You don't. Sit down. Something in my voice made her sit. Let me explain why, I said, pulling up their financial summary on my screen and rotating it so they could see. You applied for a $2.4 million loan with a stated down payment of $600,000. However, that down payment is actually a private loan from Preston's father, which you failed to disclose. That's mortgage fraud. Preston's face went red. That's a gift. I have the loan documentation. Your father's attorney sent it to our fraud prevention department when we ran the standard due diligence check. It's a loan due in 5 years with 8% interest. You lied on your application. That's a misunderstanding, Victoria said quickly. No, it's fraud. But let's continue. Your stated combined income is $780,000. However, Preston's trust distribution is being reduced to $200,000 annually starting next January. You applied for a 30-year mortgage based on income you won't have in 6 months. My father wouldn't do that, Preston snapped. I spoke with your family's financial advisor yesterday. Would you like me to call him? Silence. Your monthly debt obligations total $18,400, I continued. Credit cards, car loans, personal loans. Your monthly mortgage payment on this house would be approximately $14,000. Combined, that's $32,400 in monthly debt payments. Your actual take-home income after taxes is approximately $38,000 per month. I let that sink in. That leaves you $5,600 monthly for everything else. Utilities, food, insurance, maintenance, property taxes, and the $300,000 in repairs this house needs. You can't afford this property. Victoria's hands were shaking. You're doing this because you're jealous. I'm doing this because you don't qualify. Your debt-to-income ratio is 86%. Our maximum is 43%. Your credit utilization is over 90%. Your income is unstable. Your down payment is fraudulent. Any loan officer in this bank would reject this application. But you're my sister. Victoria's voice cracked. You could approve it anyway. That would be a violation of banking regulations, my fiduciary duty to this institution, and federal lending laws. I could lose my license and face criminal prosecution. Please, Alex, she whispered. This is my dream house. Then you shouldn't have lied on the application. Preston stood up. This is bullshit. We'll go to another bank. Feel free. I'm required to report the fraudulent application to the Connecticut Banking Commissioner. Every bank will see the flag on your credit report. Good luck. His face went white. Victoria was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. You can't do this to me. I'm not doing anything to you. You did this to yourself. You've spent years living beyond your means, accumulating debt and pretending to be wealthier than you are. Now you're facing consequences. Mom and Dad are going to hear about this. Tell them their daughter, the basic bank worker, is actually the chief lending officer who rejected your fraudulent mortgage application. I'm sure they'll be thrilled. The meeting ended with Victoria sobbing and Preston threatening to sue. I had security escort them out. I filed the required fraud report with the Connecticut Banking Commissioner that afternoon. Their application was flagged in the system. No reputable bank would touch them. That evening my phone exploded. Mom called, screaming about family loyalty. Dad sent a long email about how I'd always been jealous of Victoria. Aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone had an opinion about my cruelty. Not one of them asked if the rejection was justified. Not one of them asked about the fraud. I blocked them all. Monday morning, I arrived at work to find an email from James Chin. Alex, heard about the situation with your sister's loan. Want to confirm you followed proper protocol. Board meeting at 10. At the board meeting, I presented the complete file. Every detail of the fraud, every regulation that had been violated, every reason for rejection. The board reviewed it in silence. Then James spoke. This is textbook fraud. You handled it exactly right. If you'd approved this loan due to family pressure, we'd be having a very different conversation. 3 weeks later, I was promoted to senior vice president. My salary increased to $520,000. Victoria and Preston's engagement ended 2 months later. His family had discovered the extent of his debt and cut him off. Without his trust fund, Victoria couldn't maintain her lifestyle. She had to move back home with our parents. At 35 years old. 6 months after the rejection, I received a letter from Victoria. 3 pages of anger, blame, and accusations. The final line, "You destroyed my life over a technicality." I wrote back 1 sentence, "I enforced banking regulations. You committed fraud. There's a difference." I never heard from her again. 1 year later, I was featured in American Banker magazine. The New Generation of Banking Leadership, How Young Executives Are Changing Finance. The article mentioned that I'd rejected a mortgage application from my own sister due to fraud, demonstrating unprecedented professional integrity. My parents sent one final email, "You've destroyed this family. I hope you're proud." I replied, "I'm proud I have integrity. That's more than I can say for you." Then I blocked them too. 2 years after rejecting Victoria's loan, I was recruited to be chief risk officer at a major national bank. Triple my salary. Corner office in Manhattan. Real power. I took the job. I bought a beautiful apartment overlooking Central Park. Paid in cash, no mortgage needed. I drove a Tesla. I traveled first class. I lived the life Victoria had always pretended to live. Except mine was real, earned, and sustainable. One evening, I was having dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant when I saw her. Victoria serving tables wearing a simple uniform, looking exhausted. Our eyes met. She looked away quickly, ashamed. I finished my meal, left a generous tip, and walked out. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel vindication. I felt nothing. She'd spent years mocking my basic banking job, while I built a career. She called me poor while accumulating massive debt. She'd sneered at my success while committing fraud. And when her lies caught up with her, she'd blamed me for enforcing the rules. Some people never learn. Some people never take responsibility. Victoria was one of them. But I'd learned the most important lesson. Success isn't about appearances. It's about substance. Victoria had spent her life building a facade. I'd spent mine building a foundation. When the test came, her facade crumbled. My foundation held. That was the difference between us. That had always been the difference. I pulled out my phone and looked at that first text she'd sent. "Stick to your basic banking job while I live the dream." I smiled and deleted it. I didn't need the reminder. I knew exactly who I was. And that was enough.